Go ahead and take me off mute. There we go. Welcome to the O-House repair training. Welcome back. Today, or right now, we're going to talk about the heavy-duty shaker product line. I'm going to be talking specifically today. I'll be demonstrating a digital, but these are digital and analog units. Not to repeat myself, but I am Nathaniel Pfeifert. I'm a product design engineer here, and this is the SHHD heavy-duty shaker product line that we're dealing with. This is probably going to be the longest, most intensive one of the group that we have presented to you today. Again, we're going to try to keep it around a half-hour presentation. This might go a little bit further than the half hour. Please, we want your questions, but please hold them to the end. And if you're on the phone with us today, please mute your phones because this will be uploaded to the O-House website, and we want this used for future presentations, or we want this used for future repair. So please record your questions, and we will be asking for them at the end. This presentation, the purpose of it really is, as we've said before on other units, the purpose really is to act as it's to go along with the service manual. So we want you to be working through the service manual. The full repair is in the service manual, but this is to help familiarize you with the disassembly, reassembly, and testing of this unit. Some safety precautions, as we've gone through in other presentations. Always have it plugged into a proper source. As we zoom in, you'll see that we are using a California tester to give a specific voltage, specific frequency. This particular unit is a 230 volt, and we'll be doing that at 50 hertz. But you want to use a proper grounded source for your units with a steady, consistent frequency and voltage. Next, as with all the other units, we're going to be repairing this in a temperature-controlled laboratory environment. We don't want the unit to get scratched, so you'll see behind me we have a soft tablecloth on the table. You want it to be repaired in a soft environment and a temperature-controlled, humidity-controlled environment. The other thing we always do is when we're working with electronics, we are going to use ESD protection. Now, here's the ESD strap that we use. This is grounded. This particular unit is the most important. So we are going to be working with the PCB specifically on this unit, so it's very important that we always have ESD protection. In your service manual, there is a troubleshooting guide. I'm not going to go through, there's a lot in it. I'm not going to go through each of the points, but you'll have a symptom, possible cause, and a remedy in it. As we go through, if you follow along with that troubleshooting guide, you'll kind of see where each of the things we talk about is contained in that troubleshooting guide. So we're going to show you how to do the things that are necessary in that troubleshooting guide. Now we're going to zoom you in and take a look at some of the tools that we'll be using. All right, so this is the unit. Again, it's a 230 volt digital unit. There are analog units for these that I'll be talking about, but I won't be displaying today. And here are the tools that we're going to be using today over here. There are slight differences for the analog and digital tools. I've primarily grabbed the digital tools today, and I won't go through each of them. One of the things as we go through, we'll be doing the repair. I'm not going to go through the testing. The testing is straightforward and should be fairly easy to follow in the manual. But you, of course, will need a speed tester for the testing, which I won't be using today. So there are tools for disassembly, reassembly, and testing. I don't have all the tools for testing here, but this is a lot of the tools for disassembly and reassembly. So the troubleshooting guide has a description of each of the unit to familiarize yourself with the unit. To familiarize yourself with our basic displays, our basic digital displays, we always have a standby. The standby button turns the unit. You can think of it as turning the unit on and off, but it doesn't remove power from the unit. To remove power, you have to actually unplug it from the back. But hitting this button either puts it so that you can use the unit or puts it into standby. Then we have a time on off and up down and a speed on off and up down. Today I am not going to plug it in for you because the way the video shows this is with the display flickering quite a bit. It just can't capture the numbers, so it wouldn't help you very much. But you do have a digital display for both the speed and time. The analog functions very much like the units we've already gone through, the mini hot plate stirrer and the vortexer. The knobs work exactly the same. The one thing that we can say about the analog version is that it does have a power switch on the front, a power on-off switch on the front, and that does physically cut power. First thing we're going to talk about, after you do your once over of the unit, make sure there are no scratches. As I've said in other presentations, if you find any aesthetic defects, record those before you start working on it. And pictures of the unit as received are always a good thing. If the unit won't work, if it won't power, first thing you want to do is go to the fuse drawer. This is real easy. I'm going to walk in front of you for a second. Taking a flathead screwdriver, popping it into that fuse drawer, putting some pressure on and popping out the fuse drawer. This has 2 fuses in it. Let's see if I can get that. Yeah. That just pop in and out of the fuse drawer. And if it'll focus, you can see that, yes, this has a good element in it. That's what the fuse should look like. Pop it together. Anytime there's a power issue, even if the fuse doesn't look like it's blown, this is always a good first check. Replace the fuses, pop the fuse drawer back in, and check if that restores power. All right, now we'll move on to disassembling and opening the unit. First thing we're going to do is take the tray mat out. and set this to the side. Next, there are 4 screws on the top here that we're going to disassemble. With this one, it's pretty important that we do have a power drill. It's also important that you're wearing safety glasses for any disassembly of this unit. And of course, our ever important ESD protection, which is specifically important for this unit because we will be working for the digital units because we will be working with the circuit board. We will be also working with the power supply. Very important. Before you start, make sure you have the unit unplugged on any of the units before you open it. And you're going to take out these 4 screws. Keep the screws with the plate. Again, you'll be needing those later on. And set that to the side. You'll also notice that I have this unit on a turntable. That makes it makes it much easier to work with as it's on a table. Next, you have the top plate here. There's 6 screws around the outside that you'll want to take off. Notice that the hazard symbol back here is in the back left-hand corner. So as you're reassembling it, you want to reassemble it that way. Remove these 6 screws. As I work with my power drill, for these screws, it's not important, but when I get down into the unit, I'm going to want, it's necessary to have this long bit on the power drill. Top plate can come off. Again, screws stay with it. And go off to the side. All right. Next, this is going to get a little difficult to see. As we go inside, I'm going to ask Andy here to help me by looking down into the unit a bit. We're going to take off this front panel. To do that, we have 2 screws here and here. That's not the difficult part to see. What's difficult to see is the internals. Now, these 2 screws here also have a nut on the back. So I just put my finger in to hold the nut. You might have to get either an adjustable wrench or a pair of pliers to hold that nut if it's difficult to take off. These I have removed before, so I can just use my finger there and pull it off. Now, don't know, hopefully we can see that. There are 2 more screws. One right down here. Yeah, that's the best view. We're going to take out. These screws do not have to be taken all the way back, all the way out. They can just be taken partially. Just loosened. And at this point, the front panel just slides off. Now, here's the important part for grounding. We are going to remove all the connectors from the PCB. Some of these have locking tabs. So this one, you want to push the locking tab on before you pull it off. Same thing with this connector. Then this connector can be a little bit difficult to get off sometimes. Now, while I have this here, I'm going to talk about removing the circuit board and removing and replacing the membrane switch. So this will be the first thing that I do. To replace the membrane switch, you're going to take your flat head screwdriver, small flathead screwdriver. You're going to gently get under a corner of the membrane switch, pull it up, and rip the membrane switch off. The membrane switch is adhered with a fairly aggressive glue, and it is a once and done removal. So once you've removed the membrane switch, it will be non-functional, so you'll need to replace it with a new one. Either before or after you take that off, you're going to want to remove the connector here. This is also important to do before you replace the PCBA. It's not important to do if you're just trying to get at the internals of the unit. This can stay as one part. But if you do need to do it, you're going to want to take something and push right in the middle gently. It can take some force. And you can also go side to side. So a little bit of force here, a little bit of force here, and just work it off slowly. The important thing about this is that you don't slip and either cut the wiring or slip and damage something on the circuit board. That pops off. Then you can take the front panel membrane switch off and carefully, by lining it up with the outside of the frame, put it back on. The tail of the membrane switch goes right through this opening in the housing here. Once you have that disconnected, you can also disconnect the circuit board or remove the circuit board. There are 4 screws that hold this on: here, 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 and here. The important part here is that you just, as you're disassembling and reassembling it, you want to take them out slowly. So you're not removing one entirely. You're loosening it, loosening the rest of them, coming back, removing them, and the same thing for reattaching it. The PCB can only really go in one way. When you have it off, you'll notice the front has an LED on it that fits into the LED hole here, and the displays fit into the holes for the speed and time. So you really can't insert it wrong. When you're inserting the screws back in, you place the PCB down, align it, and again, put the screws in lightly and then go back and tighten them to the specified torque. Then just push the membrane switch tail all the way on. And you can take something to the back to push it on as well. And it should go right up against the 90-degree bend in the header. All right, so we've talked about that. Now we're going to talk about continuing to disassemble the unit. With the top housing, again, The two screws here and here can stay with the side panels, and these screws can stay with the front bezel. Those screws and nuts. Okay. Next, we're going to remove the back of the unit. First thing we're going to do is take off the RS-232 connection. First thing we're going to do is take off the RS-232 connection here. We're going to take the correct socket. This could either be a ratcheting socket wrench or a hand wrench like this one. Undo the screws. And remove the RS-232 connection. And then 4 screws from the back. As you remove these, make sure you're holding the back panel. Or it can fall down. Next, we're going to remove the orange connector here from the power supply. Know that we can get in. Good. That orange connector comes off, and the ground wire here comes off. And that can go off to the side. The screw can stay with the ground wire because we want to make sure we put that back in. Next, we're going to remove the side panels. To do that, we're going to work with the panel that has the power supply on it first. And we'll pull off the other orange connector from the power supply on the output of the power supply. There's a screw that's going to be very difficult for you to see. Let's see. There we go. We got it. There that we take out. And now both sides of the power supply are free. So that can come out. And we'll put the screw right back into the place that it came out of and put the power supply to the side. It's always good, as you put these to the side, to put them in an ESD safe bag. And that's the same thing with the PCB as well. That goes off to the side. Talking about the PCB, if we did have an analog PCB, as we're reinstalling the rheostat, it's important that there's tabs that are on the potentiometer. And it's important that as we're reinstalling it, we make sure that this tab here is removed, as we see here. Okay, going back to the disassembly, we have the power supply out. Now we can take out the other 3 screws on each of these side panels. Note as you're putting it back on that the flathead screw here that's flush with the side panel, that's going to go towards the front of the unit. 1, 2, 3. Hold this as you're taking it off so that it doesn't fall off. And that goes off to the side. And I like to put the power supply with that so that I know, so it's very easy to identify that that's the side that the power supply came out of. I'll try to tip you down a little bit more. Okay. And then the other side, again, has 3 screws that come out of it. There. There. And in the middle. And notice I'm holding the side panel as I take it out. Pop the screws back into the proper locations. Again, note that the flathead screw here goes towards the front of the unit. That'll help you put it back on. And that can go off to the side. All right, now we're to the shaker base. As we do this, if we're going to replace the entire shaker base, we can flip the unit over. Remove these 4 feet. Now these black feet are the primary feet on this unit. These are the non-aesthetic functional feet. And then the red feet here are just an aesthetic foot. And you notice I have a foot off here so that I can show you how to reassemble and put that foot back on. These feet, unlike the other ones, are not glued on. They just simply screw down and into place. Again, they're aesthetic. The unit is perfectly functional without them. They're just to give it that O-house look. So to completely remove the shaker base, which we're not going to do today, you would remove these 6 screws, the 4 feet and these 2 other screws. Flip this back over. There we go. All right. If we were removing the shaker base, we would also have to cut all the wire ties and remove the RS-232 wire, the any wires that don't go with the shaker base. So the power wire here would have to come off. And also note that we do have these wire tie holders. Now I've had this open and closed many times. So some of these, as I've opened and closed them, have come off their sticky bases. If they have, you're going to want to replace those, or at least get some double-sided tape and stick the ones that you have back down to the unit. but this one would come off of, this one would have the wire tie cut from the base. The ones around the sides that don't go with the shaker base would be cut off, and you could completely replace this whole shaker base. All right, moving on. We're going to take off this plate here. That comes off with these 9 screws. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You don't have to remove them in any particular order, but you do have to replace them in a specific order. We're going to remove these screws. Seven, 8, and 9. All right. And this is important. Let me put that off to the side. This is important if you're going to change the belt here, the V-belt, or change out the motor. All this is important to do. You wouldn't remove that if you were changing the whole shaker base. So next we're going to remove the belt, we'll remove the motor, and then I'll show you how to put it back together. So to remove the belt, you're going to take your 7/16 wrench. You can also do this with a ratchet. Loosen these up. If you're going to remove the whole motor assembly, these screws would come straight out. If you're just removing the belt, you have a pivot point here, and this here tightens or loosens on a semicircular arc. So you're just going to push it forward, push the belt off, and there's your V-belt. So we'll remove this all the way, show you how to replace the motor. If you are replacing the motor, all these wire ties would need to be cut. I'm not going to cut them today because they're a pain in the neck to get back on. But all these wire ties would need to be cut. Here, here, here. And then the wire routing would need to be redone. So it's a good idea if you are going to replace the motor, or even just replace the shaker base assembly. It's a good idea to take a picture of all the wiring before disassembling anything. So we have the one screw out. We're going to take the other bolt out. This comes off. All the wiring would be removed around both sides. You would replace the motor and redo all the wiring. To replace it, you put it back on. You're going to very lightly put these screws in. It's important that it's light because this again needs to be able to move so that you can reinstall the V-belt. Both of these are going to be put in. Snug down, but not tightened at all. Very important that this can move freely. A little resistance is good. A lot is not. That's very good. Right there. Okay. Next, we're going to reinstall the V-belt. Pushing that all the way forward. Popping the V into the groove. on both pulleys. It's easy to put one side of the belt into one side of the pulley and roll it around so that it goes into the groove all the way around the pulley. Next, we're going to tension the V-belt. So we're going to take our force gauge, hook it into the slot, into the hole there, and we're going to bring this up to 5 pounds of pressure. I'm not sure the metric conversion to that, but that's an easy search. Snug them down and then tighten them to the proper torque. Again, follow your service manual for the correct Loctite on all the screws. Loctite and torque for all the screws on the unit. But this is especially important that it gets torqued down to the proper torque. Make sure that that can move freely before reinstalling the plate on top of it. Before installing this plate, if these are installed with improper positioning of these 3 bearings, it can lock up the plate. So you want to make sure that they're all completely in the forward position, all 3 of them. With top screw straight up. So put that on. Lightly put in each of these screws. Order doesn't really matter as you're lightly putting them in. Order will matter when you tighten them down. Again, I believe this is Loctite 248 that goes onto these. Follow your service manual for proper Loctite and torque specifications. I will lightly tighten each of them. I'm just going to where this stops. I'm not really putting any pressure on any of them until I then come back and tighten all of them down. Personally, I like to get 2 into each of them and then go back and put the 3rd one in. That just gets them all positioned correctly. If each of them has 2 in, they have to be positioned correctly. Or at least the holes have to be aligned in order to have 2 screws in each. And I go back and just lightly put in the 3rd. Then I go back with my torque wrench and tighten down each. There is a very specific pattern to this. The pattern basically goes around 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And you want to go around and do that twice. So torque it down. This is very similar to what you would do when you're tightening the tires on your car. You go around in a specific pattern in order to make sure that each lug or screw or nut is equally tight. So then you would go back, do it again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. All right, so now we're back to reinstalling everything. And that's basically just the opposite of what we did to take it off. The first thing we're doing is putting back on the side panel. Again, as you're reinstalling it, note that the flathead goes towards the front of the unit. That'll give you which side panel goes on which side. Lightly put them in, each screw in. Before torquing them down, I'm going to turn the torque down low on this screwdriver. And then you're going to take your torque driver and torque them down to the proper setting. Do the other side. See that? Okay. Torque me down. Reinstall the power supply. Note here there is a sticker near where the ground is. The screw that you're putting back first goes away from this sticker, so it's not on the side that the sticker is. It's on the opposite side. See if you can, yeah, should be able to see that. Right here. Place the orange connector back onto the power supply. All right. So we have both side panels on and both side panels and the power supply. Next, we're going to do the back panel. First thing we want to replace is the ground screw on the other side of the power supply, near the ground, near where that ground sticker is. Then we're going to do up the orange connector here. and then the 4 screws on the back. And torque them down. Three, 4. Replace the RS-232 header in back. With the hex nut driver. Remember torque and Loctite settings on that. Find that in your service manual. Next, we're going to replace the front panel. To replace the front panel, I'm going to plug in all the connections. There should be 4 connectors on it. Let's see. Don't know that you can see that. I'm just going to move over this side so you can hopefully see where these connections are. 3 and 4. All right. And we're going to slide the tabs down over the 2 screws that are loose here on side panels. Screw them in one at a time, keeping pressure forward on the front panel, on the control panel. Make sure those don't get torqued down too tight. I've done that before, and it can break the tabs on the controller. So again, follow your instructions for the torque settings. Then these 2 screws come down through, and the nuts go onto the back of them. Tighten it down. And to really tighten them to the correct torque, you're going to want to make sure that the nut on the back side does not turn. Sometimes you can use your finger to do that. Sometimes you need to get a pair of pliers or a tool down in there to do that, an adjustable wrench. Same thing on the other side. you're going to look at it, and you'll see right here, there's a gap. Let me see if I can show that to you. That gap, I'll actually lift this up and bring it over to the camera. That gap should not be there. So if you do see a gap like that in the bottom, all you're going to do is loosen the screws that are down inside the unit, push it flush, and tighten them back up. And you can see there's a seam, but now no actual gap between the front bezel or the controller and the side panel. All right. Next, we're going to put the top back on. Again, remember the caution symbol goes near the power supply in the back left of the unit. Lightly put all of them in. Remember to use the proper Loctite specified in the service manual. And then you would go back around and torque them down in a crisscross pattern. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. After that, the last thing to do is just put on the tray, line up the screw holes, put these 4 flathead screws in. You see that? 1. Lightly put in all the screws, and then go back and torque them down. And again, we are crisscrossing when we torque them down. Last, we put the mat on. Check for defects, run through the final testing, and pack the unit. All right, so that was the repair training for the heavy-duty shaker. Hopefully there we go. So that was the repair training for the heavy-duty shaker, the SHHD. As always, we're there to help. Contact our customer service if you have any questions at all after going to the service manual. Are there any questions? This by far was the, of these 4 units, this by far is the most physically intense and difficult unit. Any questions? No? Thank you. We'll take one more 10-minute break and come back to you with the last unit. Our time here, it's at 9 o'clock a.m., and we'll see you in 10 minutes.